I'm going to talk in the beginning a little bit about the microbiology and the soil food web, because not many people do, and that's what we're focusing on in our piles. And then after that, I'm going to hopefully be able to show you something from at least one of our piles. And if you want to take these are, okay, 15.1 is the oldest. It's already been cured. Take a smell. You can't really smell it that well. You can mostly smell the plastic bag. But 15.1 has a sort of, I know it's done when it has a sort of a sweet, sweet smell that kind of hits me right when I take a big sniff. So feel free to take some in your hand and kind of take a sniff. 15.3 is in the middle of its process right now. So this is going to have a slight tang to it because it's still doing some work. It's still going through some growing pains. And then this is 15.5. This is our newest pile. We just started it. It's really hot. When I stuck my fingers in there to bring you a little bit, this is why this is less than everything else, because it was really hot in there. What it's going to smell like, if you can smell it, literally it smells like steaming vegetables, because that's what's happening in there. The microorganisms are so busy eating so voraciously, they add a lot of heat. It steams the vegetables and breaks them down at the same time and makes it easier to break down.
What are the numbers in 15.4?
Oh, so we have a specific numbering system for all of our piles. We started with, well, it turned out that in January 2015, we were on our 15th pile. So we decided to do 15 for the year, and then 0.1 is from the beginning on. So last year, we weren't composting for quite as long, and we had 6 piles. This year, we already have 5 piles, and we haven't hit winter yet. So and we just got a shed, so we'll be able to compost 100%, which will up our volume quite significantly. Work study people, watch out for that. Okay. So I wanted to give you an introduction into our program, first of all, for those of you that don't know. Originally, this was a workshop for work study students so they could learn what is actually going on inside the piles, but I thought it would be nice to share it with everyone if I'm doing it anyway. So for those of you that don't know, I'm running the MUM composting project right now by the skin of my teeth and my lovely work study students. So what we do is basically we take whatever food scraps you put into the barrels at Annapurna, so plate scrapings. We take raw pre-consumer vegetable cuttings and pre-consumer cooked food that for some reason or another couldn't make it out there and can't be reused. So we take about 10 barrels a day usually, and that's just breakfast and lunch. We're going to be able to take dinner soon too, so that'll up our ante a little bit. Everyone's going to have to work a little harder, but we will also get access to more funds that way. So it'll be worth it. So what we do is we take the plate scrapings and all that stuff, and we put it in the truck, and then we take it from the truck and put it into the manure spreader with 50-50 amount of wood chips and food scraps, which is usually not what you would do, but we found that the food from Annapurna is so, for lack of a better word, I don't mean a negative connotation, but it's so like soppy that we need big pieces of carbon to offset the possibility that there won't be air in the pile. So big pieces of carbon are what allow pockets of airspace in there, and they also absorb some of the moisture. So what happens is we put a layer of wood chips in the manure spreader first, then we put a layer of food scraps, and then in the winter we put a layer of wood chips again, and we take the manure spreader out into the field and we run it, and it mixes everything up and shoots it out into a long windrow. During the summer, we put another layer of food, another layer of wood chips, another layer of food, another layer of wood chips, which gives us a 3-day buffer before we have to unload, and then we unload that into a big pile. So what I do is I put wood chips first, then I have my work study students or me put raw stuff second, and then on the top I put in the wettest stuff. And you don't have to do this, but it actually helps because there's sometimes tags that are left over, and you don't want to be picking through slop to pick up tags from raw foods. So that's one advantage, but another advantage is that it goes from wettest to driest, so that eventually everything has an even chance of getting the right kind of moisture distribution, which is important for composting. So I don't know if that's more than you need to hear, but I just got really excited. So then the manure spreader dumps it out. It pushes it towards the blades at the end. It's step 4 right now, and dumps it out into a pile. And that's what our piles look like, with a lovely model next to them. And after, we usually have a 2-month turnaround, and then we put it through food again, so that there's twice the amount of organic material, and we give the wood chips more time to break down. And then we let that cure for 1 month, and that provides a finished pile. And then that pile goes to Steve's fields, and he uses that to grow his vegetables, which then he gives some of them back to the dining hall. So it's a completely closed loop system. Everything comes from around here and goes back to here, and that was kind of important for me, and I wanted to see if I could do that. So that's a priority for the project. And we get our wood chips from the Fairfield Recycling Center, which is just a couple of blocks away. Eventually, we're hoping to have access to the wood chipper that has been broken at facilities management this whole time, but then we can actually take stuff from our campus, and so it would just be purely campus instead of Fairfield. So that's a little bit of an introduction into our program. If anyone is interested, come talk to me about it. Okay, so usually when people think about plants, they think about this picture that you see here. You see a tree, you see flowers, pretty much standard stuff, but nobody actually thinks about what's going on underneath the soil. And there's an entire world out there, basically an entire ecosystem that is supporting all of this that nobody ever talks about. So I thought it would be important to bring that to light a little bit and introduce you guys to that system, because it is very important for our well-being. So there is a soil, 1 second. There's a whole soil food web. Just like there's a food web above ground, there's a food web below ground as well. And it includes the organic material that then decomposes and is eaten by bacteria and fungi at first. So bacteria and fungi are the smallest, and they're the first microorganisms to come in and start breaking things apart. The larger the surface area for them to move around on the outside, the faster they will break things apart. So if you chop things up, it'll be faster because you're giving them more surface to be able to eat. The bacteria and oh, thank you. Thank you very much. The bacteria and fungi are then eaten by some nematodes and protozoa. And what happens in this interaction is that when the fungi and bacteria are being eaten by these larger organisms, which I will show you pictures of in a little bit, when they bite into them, things go flying out, which is nutrients that are made available in a form that the plant can then take it in. So my basis of all of this is Elaine Ingham's teachings, and this is kind of revolutionary. For those of you that were in her class, you know, she says that basically all the world's soil has all the nutrients that you need in order to have a healthy plant. The only problem is that it's not available in a way that the plant can take it in. It's not in a plant intake form. So that's where the microbes come in, and they sort of process all of this stuff into their own body and make it plant available. And the roots of the plants actually exude prizes that Elaine calls it cakes and cookies. It's carbohydrates that draws specific organisms depending on what the plant needs to it. And then those organisms, just by staying there next to it and eating and pooping and living its life, make a whole set of nutrients available to the plant that the plant needs. So there's this whole relationship going on, which makes both of them incredibly important. So after the bacteria and fungi get eaten by nematodes and protozoa, there's larger nematodes that eat all of those, and then there's microarthropods that eat all of those. And not only do they eat all that stuff, break it apart, and make it plant available, they also process things in their bodies and excrete them in a form that people like to call castings, which also allows for more nutrient availability for the plants. And it's also, if you've ever seen worm castings and things like that, it's really like crumbly, like cake. It's a really good texture for the plants. It can crumble if you want, but it can also sort of stick together, which is perfect for what you would need for soil aggregates and roots at plants so that the roots can move through and stuff like that. So they kind of make the environment more hospitable for the plant specifically. And the plant asks for what it wants out of those organisms. Those organisms that can do it come there. And it's a sort of a symbiotic relationship, which is really important. And not everyone talks about that very much. When farmers are like, oh, I need more nitrogen in my soil, they're not going to say, well, you know, I need more bacteria to come in and less fungi. Nobody says that. They say, oh, well, I'm going to add synthetic nitrogen and mess up this whole system and make things a little bit worse, but get payback right away. So this is actually the way that nature is meant to work. And so this is Elaine Ingham. She's amazing. She's my idol, and she talks about the soil food web. So this kind of, I'm going to show the soil food web in a few different depictions because different people learn in different ways. So I just want to make sure that everyone can sort of understand it. So this is kind of like a free-for-all with arrows of everything. So the important things to note here is, oh, you can't really see it very well. Plants, which then have roots and shoots, which then have slaw off and create organic material, which then are eaten by fungi and bacteria, which then are eaten by protozoa, which then are eaten by bacterial feeding nematodes as well. And then these bacterial feeding nematodes and these protozoa are eaten by predatory nematodes, which are eaten by arthropods, which are then eaten by birds and animals. So this actually makes its way into the above ground system eventually, after doing everything that it needs to do inside the system down below the ground. So that's one depiction of the soil food web. This is another one that I thought was slightly different, but still pretty much the same. This is bacteria, there's organic material, and then there's protozoa, nematodes, microarthropods, and animals. So I hope you guys are kind of getting the gist. This is the model that works best for me because I'm a very linear thinker, but I understand that not everybody is. So level 1 are the plants, which then bring the organic matter. Level 2 are the decomposers, which are the fungi, the bacteria, and one nematode in particular, which is a root-feeding nematode, which you don't actually want in your soil. And we can talk about that in detail another time. These things are eaten by protozoans, which are flagellates, amoeba, stuff like that. And if we see any of them in our slides today, I'll let you know what they look like. And they're also eaten by bacterial-feeding nematodes and microarthropods. Then level 3, which are shredders mostly, level 2 is decomposers, and level 1 is photosynthesizers. So level 4 is predatory nematodes and arthropods, and they're higher level predators, and they're eaten by even higher level predators, which then bring all of these resources above ground. So does anyone have any questions about this sort of interaction and the web that's going on under your feet? Actually, none of them can work without the other. So if I see a predatory nematode in my sample, I'm actually really happy because I know that in order for this to exist, this has to exist. And in order for this to exist, this has to exist. And in order for this to exist, the organic matter is obviously there. So if I see something on the highest in my slide, I know that it definitively has everything else. So it's really a highly cooperative system. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay. Predatory, of course. Oh, that picture that was on the Facebook page, I don't know if you guys all got a chance to see it. I took that picture out of one of my slide samples. It was a predatory nematode, and you can see all of its parts, and it's super amazing. So if you get a chance, look at that picture again and appreciate all the glory of the microscopic world. Okay, so I've been talking a lot to you about pictures. This is an actual microscope slide. I don't know how clearly you can see it from back there, but there's bacteria in there which are little dots that, and you know that they're bacteria because they kind of vibrate a little and sometimes move, and they all do it at the same time, basically. There's fungi, which are these sort of long tubes. And by the way, bacteria and fungi both add acidic or basic qualities to the soil, and they both add separate nutrients and stuff like that. So it's not only the interaction of eating, but it's also the interaction of what they bring into how they change it just by living in that area. So then there is there's always organic matter, well, in good compost, which you'll see, which are big globules, basically. There's protozoa right there in a sort of hibernating state. And there's always going to be minerals in a slide, too. So if you ever look at a slide and you get confused, there's always going to be crystal-like things, which are minerals, which are good in compost. And there's always going to be organic matter, all different kinds of organic matter, which if you want to get more into, I can show you more about that in more detail another time. So basically, Elaine stresses the difference between soil and dirt. It's not the same thing. Dirt is not alive. Dirt can't provide what the plants need. Dirt can't react to what the plants need. Soil has the entire food web inside of it and has everyone ready and waiting at the command of the root, basically, in exchange for cakes and cookies, or carbohydrates, more scientifically. Exudates is what the fancy word for that is. So there's a really big difference between soil and dirt, and if you get anything out of what we're talking about today, that's kind of the biggest thing that I want to share with you guys. And our compost piles are specifically growing soil. We are nurturing and growing an ecosystem of organisms, which then, whose purpose, okay, for lack of getting too metaphorical or spiritual, but whose basic purpose is to make the plants grow better. That's kind of what ultimately the soil is making itself into, something that is good for plants to get nourishment from. So it's a really nice cycle that is highly symbiotic and works really well together. The only problem is that with conventional agriculture practices, we have disrupted that natural cycle. We have used up topsoil. Topsoil is basically what you want your plants to grow in. And we have used all of our topsoil at quicker rates than we can reproduce it. So for me, in my part, I feel like, well, we get all this food waste from Annapurna. I can help these microorganisms make more topsoil so that we can keep growing plants. Because technically, soil is the foundation of civilization. Without soil, you don't have food. Without food, you don't have people. And it's where we come from, and it's where we all go back to. And if you help nurture it, it will provide things for you as well. And I think that's in accordance with the symbiotic relationships that are going on in this system. And I would like to help with that. I also very biasedly believe that compost is basically the solution to all the world's sustainable and environmental problems. If anyone has any questions about that, please come find me. But global warming, carbon sequestration, all that stuff, it's in the soil. It can go back to the soil. That's where it's supposed to be. You can generate a lot of heat and energy from biodigesters and things like that. So that's another thing. Carbon, biodigesters. What else are food? Starvation, it can provide food for everyone. So basically, a lot of the world's major problems. Water it will hold water in better, keep it where it needs to be, and conserve it with less amount of intake into it. And air, because plants take in carbon dioxide and provide fresh oxygen for everyone to breathe. So basically everything that you need is covered by this system. If anyone has any questions or arguments, come find me. I'd love to talk to you about it. I want to give you a sort of a small idea of what I'm doing right now, so it's not like alien to you. So what I have here are samples from 3 of my 5 compost piles that we have going on right now, and each pile is in specific phases of curing or developing or just breaking down. So I took a 1/4 of a teaspoon from my pile in the middle, and I put it in here so that it would be about a 1/4 of a teaspoon, because it's the same measurement. So then I added distilled water up to the 10-point mark, so it's a 1 to 10 dilution, because usually compost is so thick and grainy that you need to dilute it at higher and higher sort of distributions so that you'll be able to see exactly what's in your pile. So I'm just shaking it now for 30 seconds to get everything activated, and then I'm going to take my pipette and squish it in a couple of times so that I get a little bit of everything in there that I can. And then I will put, depending on what size your cover slips are, mine are standard, so I figured out that for me it takes 2 drops for a standard size cover slip. So I put 2 drops on my glass slide, and then I'm going to, this is actually an art, which took me a while to figure out. So that you have no air bubbles, you slowly slide one end across, back, and then drop. So that's not excellent, but I'm not doing it on a hard surface. So hopefully there's some organisms in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick scan. I've probably fried everything during this presentation, which I didn't think about, but I'm just going to do a quick scan and see if I can find anything moving. You do a quick scan for nematodes first, because they're the largest, and then you focus in on a higher magnification for protozoa, and an even higher magnification and dilution for bacteria. So there's a whole microscopic process that Elaine has developed, and a whole spreadsheet that can tell you information. And if you want to know more about that, talk to Toya or ask her to do a workshop on the spreadsheet if she has time when she graduates. So you can see these are air bubbles right here because I didn't keep my slide on a stable surface. I kind of wanted to show you how to do it. So ideally, you won't see those. Right here is some organic material. It could look like fungi, but it's not. Fungi has specific qualifications. Let's see. Sometimes I see chlorophyll that's been heated, and it's got this really cool DNA spiral thing going on, which is really fun to look at. Anyone that's, definitive organic material. Anyone that's been in the Living Soils class, if you want to come and make a slide of any of the other piles, if the soil samples are somewhere. Oh, good. If anyone is interested in doing that, that would be nice, but you don't have to. I won't put you on the spot. So basically, this is a small look into the inside world of soil. Not very exciting yet. but I bet not everyone has seen it or has had experience with it. Okay, I am just going to switch magnifications and see if I can see anything. So you can see a bunch of minerals, which is good, organic matter. Okay. Let's see if we can find. Oh, do you see? Well, yeah, there we go. Do you see things? Okay, I'm not touching the table. That is the life that is going on inside of our compost piles. So this is mostly bacteria from what I can see. Toya, if you can see anything else, let us know. But this is basically a small peek into the secret world of what's going on inside our piles. And this is mostly bacteria right now because the pile that I got it from was not finished curing yet. So there's a lot of bacteria still eating all of the food particles first, and then everything else will come in afterwards. I usually find at least one nematode in each slide, but unfortunately, when I'm on the spot, there is none to be found. If you want to stay, I can find another one for you, but you're not obligated to stay for any amount of time. I just appreciate the time that you have spent with me today. So thank you very much.